with you about how to go about researching the solution section or thinking about it if you've done some research and found some things. So what you're seeing in front of you is a document that we've posted to Google Classroom about thinking through your solutions as different kinds of strategies that might be going on out there in the world. So you'll see it's broken up into 5 categories. You've got here legal action, legislation, non-direct violent action, building awareness and alliance, and support and services. This is kind of like when you did your social movement project as a freshman and you had those different social change strategies. Except this case, we're just talking about kind of like solutions to social problems and 5 different ways in which those might be addressed. So I want to carry you through an example. And if you look at this tool, what I've given you is like, here's the category legal action, just giving a little clarification of what we mean. So here it's descriptions and definitions. So take a case to court or challenge a law through the judicial system. And then we give you some relevant keywords you might use in a Google search that will help you find stuff that's like this. The reason why we're wanting you to try to find these things is you're not making these solutions up out of thin air. The solutions that are in your paper are most likely going to be ones that different organizations or levels of government are trying or have proposed or have at least developed some awareness, or they've come up in reports and studies as ideas for solving your problem. And so the idea is you're not making this stuff up. Instead, you want to find what you think are the best solutions and present some of them, both their pros and cons. So in order to find the stuff that's out there, you are going to use some of these keywords. So let's just try going through this. I've actually thought of the problem of gun violence. Okay, so let's say we're doing social problem is gun violence. We open up another window here and we're going to throw in one of these things here, a lawsuit, a class action suit, or court case. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go gun violence and class action. All right, class action lawsuit. Here it comes, right? So you filled it in for me. Class action lawsuit. When I look at my results here, it's going to be an NBC News source about one. Just about everyone but the gun maker gets sued. So they're talking about, actually, if you click on one of these, this one right here, this lawsuit could change how we prosecute mass shootings, basically. This one is about what some of these other ones are about too, which is the idea that there was a lawsuit brought that would, a class action suit that would sue gun makers. And so we find out about this court case, Soto v. Bushmaster Firearms International, LLC. The idea that people who were surviving family members of the Sandy Hook massacre were saying we need to be able to sue the manufacturers, distributors, and direct sellers of the guns. And so the idea is one of my solution sections might be, hey, we need to sue gun makers, or we need to bring lawsuits against gun makers. And so I would bring some of this kind of research in to talk about what's been tried and maybe why that's been good and also why that's not been so good. Because remember, you want pros and cons. Similarly, if we come back to our solutions thing, the next one is legislation. Here we're talking about proposing and creating new laws at the national, state, or local levels of government. I want to remind you here, issues may be handled at different levels of government. To remind us what we're talking about here, remember, federalism here is this system where we have a national government and then various state governments, and they share power. And even under the state governments, we have these local governments too that get their power from them. And when you think about these different levels of government, to bring up this visual here, you'll see that, the national government and state governments have a lot of shared power. And a lot of it that relates to the issues you're going to be doing. Like it says here, provide for the general welfare. That can mean anything that basically helps out people. Many of your problems fall under that very general umbrella. And so the national government may have some policies or legislation we could address, as well as the states. Some of your issues may show up more as state policies and legislation, like, setting up schools, right? Oops, didn't mean to do that. Setting up schools right here. Well, if you're doing a school-based social problem, well, then you're probably going to be looking at state laws, right? Or if you're looking at, something that's more like, military-ish, well, then maybe the national government is where you're going to be, right? That's where you're going to be. But you're going to look for probably a lot of it's going to fall into this shared power thing. I mean, it even says here, establish and regulate corporations. Well, yes, it says that here, but also on the national government side, they get to address what they call interstate commerce or business across state lines. So again, you're going to have a lot of possibility of finding legislation at the national level, at the state level, perhaps even at the local level. So when you go through and you're looking at this, we're looking for some key terms like this to throw in. So if I just do, let me do gun violence policy. I'll just take the first one, and I'm just going to take out my class action lawsuit. I'm going to go policy. Okay, I get, right, here's what I get here. I get a bunch of, whoops, we don't need that. Okay, 5 policies that states are using to curb gun violence. So these might be like, new laws, policies under specific laws, gun policy in America, talks about background checks. So it gives us a lot of sources about different policies and policies that work to reduce gun violence. So again, looking at government policies. If I throw up the term legislation here, oops, let me spell that correctly. You're going to get, all right, House panel advances anti-gun violence legislation, right? And Gun Violence Prevention Research Act of 2019. Maybe it got passed, maybe it didn't. But the idea is, and it looks like it didn't here, it says last action was referred to, probably referred to a particular committee and went nowhere. But the idea is, you even see here, Gavin Newsom signs gun violence prevention legislation. So this is actually a state example. So you've got state, and you've got up here some national stuff going on. So again, legislation gave me a very simple result. Again, my solution section might be, we need stricter gun laws at the state and national level, and I might pull out some of this research to show me what those gun laws might look like, and I can explain them. Okay, then you got this nonviolent direct action. This is like, you're taking action in public, our organizations, our groups forming. You think of your classic example like with police brutality and the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement. So we want to look for like protest or boycott, things like that. And unsurprising, if I do gun violence and protest, not Portugal, protest here, I get the March for Our Lives, right? Which most of us remember from a couple years ago. And of course, there's tons out there about that. And so your solution section might be, we need more mass direct action. We need more things like March for Our Lives to make a dent in public opinion, which would change matters on gun violence. All right, so let's do the next one. Next one is building awareness and alliance. This is where we're thinking about how you educate the public, you mobilize them, you get them active, you organize them. A lot of nonprofit organizations are doing this kind of stuff. A lot of them have little sections on their websites actually where they say stuff like take action. So you could put take action in your Google search, or throw in a term like advocacy or awareness. So if I take one of those and I do gun violence awareness, well, I start writing it, and right there, let's just see what comes up under gun violence awareness. So there's a national day sponsored by the American Public Health Association. There's something about wearing orange for gun safety. There's even something about a Golden Gate Bridge march for national gun violence. So again, they're talking about the march as a way of doing awareness, but again, they're going to give you sources and think about how are we going to raise awareness on this issue. Maybe that's a key tactic to move your social problem forward and change it. Finally, the last area I look at is it says support and services. There's really 2 aspects. There's providing support to those affected by the problem. So this isn't like we're necessarily trying to solve the problem, but at least reduce the impact of it. But there's also like provide services that address the causes of the problem, right? So are there ways we can try to reduce some other things that are leading to our social problem? Are there, for instance, on the model paper, so it'd be like, let's say we provide services to reduce alcohol consumption on college campuses so that there is less sexual assault. If we do gun violence, let's just do gun violence. And if you remember, the things on here they said was one of the key things I think is to note this. look for some .org, some organizations, because while organizations can't change the law, a lot of them are out there trying to do stuff to help people with these problems. So if I go gun violence and I just do a .org search, I'm also going to see a little bit about like organizations that are trying to address this. And if I scroll down here a little bit, I've got like the Trace, which reports on gun violence and violence in America. So they're trying to shed light on it. That sounds actually more like awareness. Um, Maybe that wasn't so good. Maybe the .org didn't do it. Let's see what some of the other ones are. Let's try this one like, service. Let's try support. Let's try support. So gun violence support. Oh, look, we got gun violence support groups near me, victims of gun violence support groups. Well, victim was another one of our words in there. We go gun violence support, and it's going to pull up something in a second. All right, there we go. Resources for survivors, Everytown for gun safety, the movement to end gun violence. We're going to find a lot about, looks like people here actually continuing to mobilize to stop it. But there are some things around trauma, connection, and services. So they're trying to help people. Maybe look here with mental health supports and things like that. So you might want to look at those kinds of things too. So you've got these categories. It's not that every single one will be related to your social problem. The gun violence one happened to be one where I could find a lot pretty easily. But others you may find a lot under legal action and legislation and not so much on the others. Or you may find a ton where people are trying to build awareness and advocacy and stuff like that, and maybe not so much happening on nonviolent direct action. Almost all of yours, I can guarantee, have tried some sort of policy. Like, I would be surprised if any of your social problems, especially the ones in the United States, don't have some proposed, at least, bill or something like that out there. So you got your key terms here, and you got your categories here. And what you're doing is you're just doing some research to try to say, can I describe to you something that we could try or that has been tried, and talk about some of the pros and cons of that thing. Okay, that's all you're really doing in your solutions section. You're saying, here's what can be done. And in some cases, it will be things like laws that are being tried, or maybe there's a law, but it needs to be strengthened. You can really talk about the solutions as things which need to happen more if it's already being done some, okay? So for instance, that gun violence class action lawsuit where they're suing the gun makers, that's one example. It's not happening across the board. You could talk about a solution is to do that to all the gun manufacturers and then discuss the current class action suit. The idea is to think about the research you find as examples you can build on to talk about a solution that could be done. I know that's a lot to think about. I would say what you should do is go through your research and see, do I have any research related to this kind of stuff? Do I have anything that's shown me any of these 5 categories? If I haven't, then I should do some keyword searching with this kind of stuff. And if you have found stuff that sounds like this, go read it, see if it's been effective, and note pros and cons of what has been done so far. So you can discuss it in your paper. This should be the section of the paper where you really just have to report out on a solution, and there might be like 2 to 3 sources that talk about that particular solution. Okay, best of luck. Remember, we're here to support you with it, Mr. Baroya, Miss Reagan, and I, and so we look forward to what you come up with here, and really, really, really good work so far, everybody, so keep it up.